And welcome everybody to another Smart Money Circle update. I'm Adam Sarhan. With me today is Howard Wilson, who's the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer at PagerDuty. The ticker symbol is PD. Howard, thank you so much for taking the time and welcome to the Smart Money Circle.
Thank you, Adam. I'm delighted to be here.
So Howard, I always like to begin. Can you tell us your story and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, I have a little bit of an unconventional story, Adam. I didn't start out my career in the finance track. In fact, my background was software engineering. So I started my career writing code, which seems like decades, aeons ago, in terms of when they all began. But along the way, I actually found that I had a real passion for solving problems, whatever they were from a business consulting perspective. So I really consider myself, fortunate to have had a career where I went from the engineering track into consulting, into project management, into technical support management, into operations management. I've had roles as the head of operations in large software companies, to also then being a COO, being a chief commercial officer. And so interestingly, at PagerDuty, my initial role was really chief commercial officer, covering a whole range of functions. Because we were a smaller company back then, when I joined PagerDuty, we were, less than 50 million in annual recurring revenue. This is like 7 years ago. I sort of had a very broad portfolio, and then inherited finance along the way. And then before our IPO, we IPO'd in 2019, April of 2019. The year before that, I was acting CFO, and our CEO said, what would you think about stepping into the role permanently? And so I did, and I love it. I love it because I think that the CFO role has certainly become one that's very business focused, and understanding how do you optimize a business, how do you deal with investors, how do you deal with customers, and that's what I love about it.
A great journey. So let's talk about PagerDuty, the business itself. Please give us a general overview and then any competitive advantages that you want to share with the audience, please.
Sure. So PagerDuty is a digital operations management platform. Companies use us to be able to manage their digital assets or digital properties in order to ensure that they can deliver a great customer experience. So this means that we have 26,000 organizations on our platform today. Within that 26,000, we have some very small companies, to 68 of the Fortune 100, to nearly half of the Fortune 500. And these are companies that are relying on us to be able to help them ensure that if there is a potential issue with their digital application or their digital website, that they're able to respond in a timely fashion, and are able to respond before customer even knows that there's an issue, or that if there is a problem, that they can respond really quickly and orchestrate the right people to solve the problem. So our software automates everything from the diagnostic through to the resolution of an issue. And this has become critical for large organizations, because managing risk and being able to manage any kind of failure in a business has become critical. If you're in travel and hospitality, or media and entertainment, or online commerce, or financial services, being able to deliver that perfect customer experience is key. So we pride ourselves on being, an enterprise SaaS company that helps our customers be successful in driving their business.
I love it. And Howard, I want to congratulate you and the entire team, because I'm a growth investor by training. I love finding undervalued growth stocks, and your earnings have been explosive. You took the company, it was losing money the first few years, which is normal. Now it's on track to be positive in 23. 24 estimates are expected to explode for EPS, if I'm correct, from around 4 cents this year to 64 cents next year, and then to 76 cents the year after. That's a stunning, overwhelmingly, one of the strongest in growth from a percent standpoint that I've seen in God knows how long. You've got almost 1,500 and plus % growth year over year. Earnings are up triple digits. Sales are up double digits each of the last 4 quarters. You've got really good pre-tax margin. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds here, but just hats off. You've got explosive growth going forward.
Yeah, thanks so much, Adam. I think, we have, as a company and as a leadership team, always focused on how do we balance growth with profitability. We've always felt very strongly about being able to run on our own steam And so we've been very programmatic in terms of thinking about how do we actually move that company as we've grown from when we IPO'd around 100 million to now over 400 million in revenue, to, as you say, being from on an adjusted basis, being negative to now being positive. This will be our second year. And you're right, like over 1,000 basis points improvements, even from 23 to 24.
I mean, congratulations on that success, because once the market environment catches on, you're going to see just, I mean, at least my opinion, but okay, beautiful. So next question, we spoke about risk briefly. Can you talk about risk, how you handle risk, and what are some lessons you've learned or mistakes you've seen people make and or you've made, and how you avoid them and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, I always think, managing risk is about balance, right? And why I say that is there is a human tendency to always orient towards the worst outcome. And whilst I believe that you need to understand the worst outcome, I think you need to always make sure that you're looking at the full range of outcomes, and then center yourself on what's most likely. And part of that experience for me comes from, I was with a software company back in 2008 during the global financial crisis, or as we came to call it afterwards. And it was a company that actually focused on servicing the mining industry, which was hit really strongly by the commodities crisis. There was also then this whole implosion that was happening in the financial markets. And we were in a situation where the company had the potential to, because our customers were under stress, our customers couldn't pay us. And we were having to contemplate, like, how do you manage through that environment? And I think what we did as a leadership team, I wasn't the CFO, but as part of the leadership team, is we looked really carefully at how did we prioritize the areas that were most important to our customers and most important to our employees, and try to take a balanced approach, which include raising debt at a time that wasn't all that great to raise debt. But that actually gave us the coverage that we needed to move forward. So I always think that when it comes to risk, it's, don't allow yourself to only be oriented to the worst outcome. Try and make sure that you approach it with balance. And I think it's always looking at it through the lens of any potential risk to the business. It's got multiple stakeholders, right? Yeah. There are multiple people who could be invested in it in some way. So you need to think about, is this a risk for shareholders? Is it a risk for customers? Is it a risk for company reputation? Is it a risk for our employees? Is there a regulatory element to it? And so I think it's always being balanced and multidimensional.
I love that. Finding multiple layers of risk is really, really, really critical. So next question for you. What are some timeless lessons you've learned along the way that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, I think one of the things that sort of came to me early in my career was really around trying to always draw a line between what you can control and what you can't, right? And sometimes it's very difficult. I know even for me as a person, it always feels a very strong sense of responsibility. I sometimes almost want to feel responsible even for the macro environment, right? But I can't control the macro environment, but I do know the things that I can control. So I think for me, a timeless lesson, and this was from a manager that I had kind of back in my early days as a software engineer. She always used to say to me, it's like, okay, let's try and sort of make a list of what are the things that we can actually manage and what are the things that we can't. And that sort of set like a mindset for me around, okay, what can I control? What can I change? Because there's some things that I can change and there's some things that I can't. And don't focus your energy on the things that you can't change. Right. Focus your energy on the things that you have the ability to impact. And I think even for us as a company in this current environment, we've tried to take that mindset. Like, we don't control the macro. We understand that our customers are under pressure. So we need to think about, well, how do we adjust? What are the adjustments that we can make? And how can we make them quickly? And I would say that's been a timeless lesson for me. It's kind of identify, draw the list, what's in your control and what isn't.
Yeah, I love that. Like, especially now, like you said, the macro environment's not conducive for growth stocks. We get that, but this too shall pass. Just like a hurricane, if you want to stay dry, you don't go outside when there's a hurricane, wait for it to pass, and then you get beautiful weather when it's over. So yeah, that's a really, really good lesson. Couple that with the multiple levels of risk that you mentioned earlier, you're now onto something really good because you're putting framework together for proper decision making and how to handle stress and all that fun stuff. So that's really, really powerful.
And I think, Adam, your point about this too shall pass. I know, like, I've been around long enough. I've lived through multiple recessions and economic downturns and through some really great boom times too. And so I always have confidence that, the cycle will continue. And so I've sometimes explained this to, using your hurricane analogy, to our employees as though, this is bad weather that will come, right? So what you need to do is, in the good times, before there's bad weather, prepare yourself, right?
Yeah.
Have a strong balance sheet. Make
100%.
sure that you've got the company into the right sort of financial profile, and then you're able to weather that storm. But the part when the storm is over, you're in a position to be able to then act and be poised for action.
Yeah, no, I love that. So let's talk about some timeless mistakes. What are some timeless mistakes you've made or you've seen people make, and how do you avoid them?
Well, I think the one thing is I have a very strong results focus. And I think one of the lessons that I've learned is that if you want to be a successful leader, you need to balance your focus on the task at hand and the people. Mm-hmm. I sometimes feel as though I've become very oriented at times around, like, what's the result I'm trying to drive? And you can leave people behind. And I think that's a mistake, right? And that's something that I know for myself. I have to keep reminding myself. And even for, when you're managing people who early in their careers, sometimes you can forget that what's obvious to you is not obvious to other people.
Right.
And so if someone is new in the career, and sometimes you feel, well, I'm repeating myself, but that's actually okay, right? Because when you repeat yourself, you're helping someone get the context, you're helping them understand what they need to do, and that will help them be with you on that journey. So I think for myself, that's one thing. I'm always trying to strive that balance. I tell my team, like, if I'm becoming too task focused, like, tell me. If it seems as though I don't care, tell me, because I do care. Like, I care very deeply. It's like, it's part of for me, I build a team around people who I really care about and I want them to be successful. But if you become too focused, it could seem as though you're not paying attention.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I love that. What about leadership? So it's a perfect segue to my next question. What makes a great leader, and what are some of the best lessons you've learned about leadership?
Yeah, I think, when I look at some of the leaders who, I admire and respect, I think that they've often had a few characteristics that stand out to me. The one is optimism. I think that a strong leader needs to be optimistic, not unrealistic, not kind of the rose-colored glasses optimism, but like a realistic optimism around, like, there is a path, we can succeed, let's move forward. I also think there's courage. I think it's hard to be a leader in difficult times. It's easy to be a leader in easy times, but when times are difficult, it requires courage, because you're needing to say, well, I'm actually going to step past this and I'm going to have confidence in the future. And then I think being a good leader, the other characteristic is caring deeply about people, right? And that can be whether they're your employees or whether they're your customers. It's like, center on the people that are in that equation, whether they're investors, customers, suppliers, employees, all of those folks, because that's really what's going to help you connect and ensure that you are bringing real success.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And next question, adversity and some obstacles. How do you handle adversity, and what are some obstacles you've had to overcome or you've seen other people overcome that you'd like to share with the audience, please?
Yeah, I mean, I think my first rule around adversity is don't panic, right? Okay. So I often think that it's a case of when a situation is tough or difficult, or you're facing some adversity, it's like, do your best not to panic, because and sometimes there's a little bit of a joke around even within our team about the fact that I can stay calm even under the worst circumstances. But I've almost psyched myself up mentally to say, well, look, no matter what the situation is, let's get a clear assessment. And when I have that clear assessment, I can move forward. And I think part of dealing with adversity is understanding upfront what's important for you. And I know from like a personal perspective, when I think about my career, I have considered myself really honored and privileged to have worked with some really great leaders who where I've had really strong values alignment. And I think that when you think about what are the things that are most important to you, and people will often will trot out the things around, oh, well, honesty, integrity, which I agree. Like, to me, those are table stakes. But I think it's often about understanding values alignment with how people deal with people. So I think one obstacle that I faced is that even when I first moved to the US many years ago, I was working, for a company with a leader who was a great leader. But I realized that, and I just moved my family, right? And now this is a situation where you're kind of in another country. And I realized that this was a very capable leader, really someone who I respected. But our way of working was just not as well aligned as I would have liked it to be. And I think, you have an advantage when you've been working for many years and you're an executive, right? So there's a luxury associated with that, which you maybe don't have early on in your career. But it made me think about, well, what were the values that were most important to me? Like, how do I feel about facilitating different opinions, or how do I feel about managing an approach? And that can then lead you to making decisions. Doesn't say that either is right or wrong, but it's like, what's important for me? So I think when you think about adversity, it's like, don't panic and understand up front, what are the things that are most important to you?
Yeah, I love that. That almost ties back to what you were saying earlier about the control factor, where focus on what you can control, but somewhat with a different flavor of it, because it's not so much, it's just another layer of it. I love that. Yeah. So before we go on to the next question, it sounds like you're very much focused on the now. Do you meditate at all, or do you, when crisis hits, you step back and you notice that, hey, this is happening, let's take a breath and stay calm here, and then focus on what we can control, or however you want to, slice it up and dice it up, but you stay calm. Yeah. Speak to us a little about that, please, because I've noticed that's a commonality with many of the C-suite executives that come on the show, where they have this uncanny, yes, they have the optimism, which you mentioned as well, but also the ability to stay calm as bullets are flying. What does that process look like? How do you de-stress, and so on and so forth, please?
So I am a person who loves walking. So I kind of have a goal. I walk 100,000 steps a week. Like, that's kind of my minimum. And that's almost, if you like, a bit of a moving meditation, although it's not structured. But I do that every morning and every evening. I walk, and that's kind of my thinking time. Majority of the time, I'm not listening to anything. It's just time to think. And I find that that's always such a good reset at the start of the day. It's often an opportunity for me to think about, what have I got to get done sometimes? But I try and force myself as well to think about, like, okay, where am I now? What am I enjoying? I mean, living in San Francisco, lovely city, able to, enjoy good weather most of the year. All those things sort of help center me. If we are going through a difficult time, my go-to is like, I'm going for a walk, right? Yeah. Maybe go for a walk because I can clear my mind. I get rid of any other stimuli, and I'm able to focus on things.
Love that. So I'm a walker too. I mean, this is our first time that we meet, but I found that it is incredibly liberating and powerful, and just quieting the mind. I don't have my earbuds in or headphones. I see people I don't do any of that stuff either. And I absolutely love what you're saying here, because it's so incredibly powerful to just step out and almost like look at things from a party point of view. It's like, what would this character do in a movie type of a thing? Yeah. Okay. I love that. Thank you for that, Howard. So let's talk about advice. What's the best piece of advice you'd like to share with the audience or with your 30-year-old self?
I think the piece that I would share is really around understanding that everyone can make a contribution. I remember early on in my career as well, I was working for a small software company in South Africa, and one of our managers, leaders there, one of the executives of the company, I was in a design session, and I was listening in. I was early in my career. I was a little bit nervous to say anything. And I had a view, I had an opinion. And I made the statement. I said, if I could put in my 2 cents worth, I'd like to tell you, what I have to say. So John listened to all of this, and he said, okay, that's great. And then afterwards he said to me, Howard, I don't ever want you to use the term your 2 cents worth. And I was like, no, what have I said? And he said, well, it undervalues your contribution, right? So we employed you because we felt you had a contribution to make from day one. And I always want you to think about that. Always make a contribution. Don't undermine it. Always see that you can do that. And I think, like, for our teams and for our people, we should always create an environment where everybody can have a contribution. Doesn't matter if they're new with the company or they've been with the company for a long time. Doesn't matter where they come from. And I think that's, one piece of advice that I think is important. And I also think don't feel obliged to stay in your lane. Like, I didn't think I'd become a public company CFO when I started out as a software engineer. So there's no reason to feel that you have to stay in one track. Be prepared to sort of step forward, try something else. If people are prepared to take a chance on you, grab it, like go and give it a try.
I love that. Well, Howard, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute delight, and your stock is, in my opinion, super set up for massive growth going forward. I'm excited to see the earnings growth. The over 1,500% growth year over year is fantastic, and another 80% thereafter. So hats off to you and your team. Ticker symbol is PD. People can learn more on PagerDuty. The website is, let me see, do you want the IR page, or do you give the PagerDuty.com?
PagerDuty.com is good, and you can navigate to our IR page from there.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, and hopefully we'll see you on again soon.
Thank you, Adam. Really appreciate the opportunity.